Hi guys and welcome to the circus. So this is my last deck profile for Pale Moon in Vanguard 0, and this is probably, I would say, the best variant of Pale Moon that I made. This is also inspired by one of you guys who suggested that I should make a list mixing both aggressive and defensive builds. This is the list that I came up with, and it actually works pretty well. I've used this a couple of times in official tournaments, grinding on rank, and clearing the tournament mode. This list is hella fun. It's really interesting, but as a disclaimer, it's a bit higher rolly than usual because you really need to balance out your aggressive playstyle and your defensive playstyle. But once you got the hang of it, it's really effective and it's really fun to do. So without further ado, here is the deck list. Okay, as you can see, it's a bit of a mess, especially on the grade 1s and the grade 2s. The grade 3s are a bit interesting, and then everything here has a reason why I ran it at certain ratios, at certain triggers in the grade 3s, and let's get straight into it. So we run the starter Smiling Presenter because she is the best starter that you can use because first of all, she doesn't cause a counterblast, which is really important. She fetches out your units pretty consistently, especially your Dreamy Fortresses, and sometimes if you need a Trapezist or a Crimson Beast Tamer in the soul, she can potentially fetch it out for you. You can spam her every time you have a Trapezist in hand or every time you go to Limit Break. In my opinion, Smiling Presenter is the best starter in this set. She can dodge the back row snipers, like for example Narukami's starter, sometimes Tejas, because she doesn't cost anything. Next, we run 2 purple Trapezists. I said before that I have 3 of her, but at this list I only run her at 2 because sometimes I really don't use her that much unless I have her in the soul already or I have an Alice available to play. If I opened up with her, she's the best ride target, but any other grade 1s aside from the PGs are also really amazing ride targets because they can just be called out when you use your limit break anyways. If you want to run her at 3, you can just cut out some of the pieces that I ran here, and that's that. Aside from the 4 PGs, obviously, we run 3 Skull Jugglers for the Soul Chargers. I find myself looking for more soul and I decided to bump up Skull Juggler here at 3 because we only run 2 Nitro Jugglers as of now because the grade 2 slots are tighter than usual. So bumping Skull Juggler to 3 is the best option in my opinion. Next, we run 3 Turquoise Beast Tamers. Okay, so we run the Crimson Beast Tamer engine here, and Turquoise Beast Tamer is really amazing here because once you open up with her and you have a Crimson Beast Tamer in your soul, she becomes a 10k base booster, and when you hit a stand, your standard unit almost certainly goes up to defensive numbers with her help, which is really good. She's also not that bad of a ride target, a soul target if you want to fetch her using Smiling Presenter. Basically, if you run the Crimson Beast Tamer, you want to run Turquoise Beast Tamer as well. Finally, we run our one-off Midnight Bunny. I used to run Fire Juggler instead for emergency purposes, but I think Midnight Bunny is better. Yet again, they're both amazing in their own ways. Midnight Bunny assures that you can multi-attack, and Fire Juggler requires a trigger check and needs to boost the Vanguard only. I only ran her at 1 because we only run 2 purple Trapezists, which is her best friend because she pairs up really well with her. This is basically the slot for the tech card if you want to run Fire Jugglers because she works better for you. I said that this list is the best only on my opinion. This list had the most success out of all the variants of Pale Moon lists that I've tried over the past few weeks. Moving on to the grade 2s, we only run 3 Crimson Beast Tamers unfortunately because the slots in grade 2s became so much tighter because you need to balance out your aggressiveness and your defensive. I decided to lower down Crimson Beast Tamer to 3 because you only need 1 of her in the soul, which is why I ran 4 copies of Barking Manticore and 3 copies of Turquoise Beast Tamer to compensate for the lack of Crimson Beast Tamers that you can run. In that way, Crimson Beast Tamer's power can still be balanced if you run other units that rely on her more. Next, we run 2 Nitro Jugglers because it's the only slots we have left for the Soul Chargers. So Soul Chargers are the perfect cards to put in those slots. Next, our star of the show, Dreamy Fortress at 4, because we still want to prioritize on fetching those Dreamy Fortresses in the soul, because Dreamy Fortress acts as your emergency button when you don't have anything else to defend. He shuts down a lot of decks in this current meta when you play him in the right timing. Maybe I'll do a separate video on how to play it right, in my opinion. If you want that kind of video, leave it down in the comments and I'll consider making it. If you have him in hand, you want to reserve that, or you just ride him and then call one of him when you do your limit break, or you can just call it out via Trapezist or Alice or Midnight Bunnies. He is one of the best ride targets aside from Crimson Beast Tamer. Speaking of which, regarding if you want to mulligan between Crimson Beast Tamer and Dreamy Fortress, I would suggest just ditching out your Crimson Beast Tamers, because Dreamy Fortresses are really valuable once you get them in the soul really early using your Smiling Presenters and your Dancing Princesses of the Night Sky. Speaking of her, we run 4 Dancing Princesses because we now have 2 units that you want in our soul, which are Crimson Beast Tamers and Dreamy Fortresses. So absolute 4 off for Dancing Princess. If you can't soul charge them randomly, you can just fetch them out for a counter blast. Moving on to the grade 3s, which is kind of the spicy lineup that I went with. Let's start it off with our first grade 3 we have here. Our 4 Nightmare Doll Alices as our heal. Okay, so let me start explaining, okay? Alice doesn't actually do much in this current meta because our opponent is always gonna be on an 11k base unless they misride for some reason. To use her effectively without losing anything, you want to have a Trapezist in your soul to reset the other side of the column. She's only a 10k base, which cannot hit alone against 11k base units. You wanna commit a booster for her, which is actually a quite heavy cost in this current list because we run Turquoise Beast Tamers, which is our best boosters in this list. I ran her as the heal because I don't really want to see her really early, because sometimes when I have her in hand, I'm kind of forced to use her, if that makes sense. And I actually want to reserve my counter blast for my limit breaks later in the game, because that limit break is really powerful. But I still want to run her in the list as an option, so I just ran her as the heal. This makes her the best heal that you can possibly draw, because once you draw into her, you have another option to work with. If your opponent somehow is a 10k base or really early in the game, you can use her that moment to do a little multi-attacking, maybe push more damage and something like that. It works really well for me this way. I don't know if it will work for you or not. If somehow you have terrible luck where you draw a lot of heals, like my good friend Cora Golzard, you can probably just run Farah instead because she's an 11k base. She is a good rear guard and a good backup ride target when you have another copy of her in hand. Next, we run 4 Barking Manticore because we run the Crimson Beast Tamer engine. Obviously, if you run the Crimson Beast Tamer engine and you want to use it effectively to the maximum extent, because he is a amazing rear guard, hitting for 13k alone. If you hit a stand, you can hit over defensives really consistent. Basically, he's here because Crimson Beast Tamer is here. Next, our only ride target that we want is Silvertone Dragon Tamer Lukier. Okay, so I think I'll just start explaining the triggers as I go on. I ran Barking Manticore as the draw, and Lukier and Midnight Invader as the stand. The reason is I only want 1 copy of Lukier. Anything else is just basically a loss of a trigger or just a rear guard. So if I only want 1 Lukier, I would rather have the rest as triggers that I really want to check, which are stands. I want to check more stands than draws because it provides me with the multi-attacks that I need to compensate for Alice being the heal and only having 1 multi-attacking unit, which is Midnight Bunny. I ran Barking Manticore as the draw because if I opened up with him, he is the best grade 3 rear guard that I have, and I don't lose stands because when I check a stand, you can just stand him and then do another multi-attacking with a number that hits over defensives. I hope that makes sense. If this works for you, feel free to do it. If not, you can just change triggers here and there to the way that you like, because it's always going to be up to you. Finally, our one-off tech card, which is Midnight Invader, because he's the second best rear guard that we have because he hits over 11k base vanguards basically. And as our 5th stand, and there's nothing much else to say about him. So that's the list. Again, we run 4 draws, 5 stand and 4 heals because we want to go multi-attacking more instead of drawing cards. Because Lukier just pluses your board whenever you use her limit break. If you use like 2 dancing princesses or 1 dancing princess, you have more Lukiers to work with, and then just go use your soul chargers again, and then to refill your soul, fetch out your Dreamy Fortresses using your Smiling Presenters, make multi-attacking, make huge columns using your Crimson Base Tamer engine, provide little multi-attacks when you opened up with Alice or Midnight Bunny, and this deck can do both aggressive and defensive at the same time. Again, a huge shout out to the person that suggested to build an aggressive and defensive build in one list, and this is the result of it after all those weeks of playtesting with it. This is the list that I am confident in saying the best list that I can come up with as of now. And yeah, if you also have any questions, feel free to comment them down below so I can try to answer them. Also, if you tried this list out, leave your stories in the comments because I would really like to hear your feedback towards it. Because again, this is just my personal experience playing with this deck. And yeah, hope you find this interesting. If you did, please consider liking and please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.